want to tell you some truths today, some real truths that you're probably not aware of. One of the things that we live in is what's called a core belief system. And a core belief system is one of the hardest things you can possibly break out of. And then we're all trying to break out of it, but we just don't know we are. Core belief systems come from one system. They originate from one place. But they've manifested over years and years into different systems. But they all originate from that original system. These systems are systems of what are called control. We are controlled. Has anybody ever looked at the word con nautically? What does it mean? It means to navigate. It means to steer the course of a vessel. And what's a troll? Come on, it's that simple. Trick trap over the bridge. And what happens when we buck the system? What comes into play? The control. This is how simple it is. I realise that all of this that we live in started with a book. And it's going to end with a book. The reason it's got to end with a book is because there is a book that created a core belief system that everyone has subscribed to. Whether you meant to or you realise you have, doesn't matter. You do subscribe to it because you accept everything that goes on in this country and in this world daily. You accept it. And it's normally done in the name of something. If you want to go along the lines of treason, which has been talked about, then I will give you one little bit of advice. Take yourselves tonight to a police station and get yourselves arrested for treason, because you are committing it right now. It's called misprision of treason. It is an offence to know that treason exists without doing something about it. So how many of you are going to come with me down to a police station and get ourselves arrested? But it's true. This lady up here gave me some very, very interesting information once when I started in this. And this, I don't know if anyone's had the pleasure of speaking to Elizabeth. She was fascinating. She was like speaking to the Queen. That's how she spoke. But she had the most incredible sense of humour. I had such giggles with her. And with Elizabeth, I managed to bridge a divide because we've been split up by divides. This is what a core belief system does. It creates divides because that's how it protects itself. When you believe in something, there is a divide between you and someone else who believes different. It's natural. If I believe one thing and you believe something different, then there's a conflict. A conflict. Have you ever looked at every word that starts with con? Go and do it. Then define the words. Get a dictionary, start defining words. Look at the origins of these words. It's incredible. I can give you so many of them. So many of them. I used to talk to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth spoke very properly. Queen's English, I understand it's called. I don't know what version of English I speak. I had trouble speaking any part of it, to be quite honest with you. There's words I just cannot say. I bridged a class divide with Elizabeth. A working class man who speaks like some coming out of somewhere out of here, London, spoke to someone whose dad, I don't know if you know, was the High Court Circuit Judge, Judge Beckett. Elizabeth used to talk to me about things that Fabians, and she used to talk to me about Balliol College, and she used to talk to me about who was trained at Balliol College. Specific people. Gordon Brown, Mr. Blair, a few people out of the Conservatory, the Conservatives. The con. So when we used to talk about these things, I didn't actually know what I was listening to because I didn't understand anything. So I used to just be polite and listen. What I've done is, over the last year, is I've done a lot of talking. And when you're talking, you can't listen. And you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a particular reason. So you listen more than you talk. Because it's the only way you can learn, is when you listen. So I listened to what Elizabeth said, and this is over 2 years ago. And Elizabeth talked about something called the 1911 Parliament Act, and how damning this act was. Now, I couldn't get the words to this act, because it's not available on the internet, and I know why now. There's a few acts that I don't know if you know this that are not available on the internet. The 1925 Gold Standards Act, the 1922 National Insurance Act, the 1869 Bankruptcy Act and the Parliament Act. They're not available, but they're going to be next week. And do you know how you do it? It's this simple. You ring up Parliament, Parliamentary Archives, and you ask them for copies. And they photocopy it off the statute roll and send it to you. That's how simple it is. See, everything has a simple answer. Everything. Now, I'm going to do this because Roger asked me, because I wasn't actually going to talk here today. I rang you up to politely decline, didn't I? He did actually, yeah. You're such a bully. But I want to talk about the 1911 Parliament Act. I want to show you something that happened that you're not aware of. Because I want to show you the actual reason, really, why we have this thing called a constitution. Okay? That is not actually here to benefit you in any shape, form or fashion. It's a device of manipulation and corruption. It's been systematically arranged over 700 and odd years to achieve something that could not be done, and that was the oppression of the people of this island. Because the people behind this fear us to such an extent they daren't come out rightly and tell you that you are serfs to them, because they fear you. Because we possess something on this island that's not possessed anywhere else in the world, as far as I can see it. The people of this island possess an ability to actually allow themselves to enter into voluntary servitude in the service of their own people. All of you in this room, if you are entering onto this path of lawful rebellion, are about to do that. You are now entering into voluntary servitude to serve your people. And the reason you... Oh, look, pigeon. There's another one up there. And the reason you're doing this is because this country does not need representatives. It does not need rulers. It needs servants. That's all it is. And if you are asked to contribute to any of the services that you as a people require, then you should have complete transparency and full accountability on where that contribution's gone. Why do we have the corridors of secrets? Why is everything kept in the shadows, masked in corruption? And every walk of government are the abysses where this corruption spews. Every walk of it. I can give you evidence that there are councils out there that have multiple CCJs, county court judgments against them. I can prove they all have company numbers. I can prove they have directors and they are doing business. But I don't want to do that to you. I want to ask you one simple question. If I can provide this evidence, this proves something. It proves irresponsibility. So if these people are so irresponsible with your money, why the bloody hell are you still paying them? But you're only paying them because you fear. And what do you fear? A core belief system. that whatever Parliament does, you have to adhere to. That's what you fear. And what's been created? A world of materialistic value, possessions. And what do? We value our possessions. When the truth really is, you don't actually own anything, it owns you. And that's how the core belief system has trapped you. Because what do they use against you? If you don't toe the line, we're going to take your possessions. That's how it works. That's how simply it works. That's how simply you're controlled. Take the word consumer. Right. Consumer. You're consumers. You consume things. Generally, if you look at consumers and you look at the way it's set up into primary, secondary and tertiary. That's how it's set up. And I don't want to go into that because that's about animal life, but it does actually relate to what I'm talking about. You're consumers, so you consume things, not just food. You consume all sorts of things. Have you noticed that anything you buy doesn't last much longer than the guarantee? Do you feel that's by mistake? Have you noticed that everything you buy seems to be really high at one time and then suddenly comes down to a very low price? Do you know why that happens? Sell-by dates. Yeah, it's one reason I smoke. Yeah, we'll stick with that one, sell-by dates. Yeah, sell-by dates. Have we not noticed that food doesn't seem to last as long as it used to, even though it's pumped full of so-called preservatives to make it last longer? That sounds very dodgy. Fruit. We go and buy fresh fruit. How long does it stay fresh for? So what am I getting at? It's very simple. A throwaway nation. Yeah. What I'm getting at is you have to go and buy more stuff more of the time. So who benefits from that? Exactly. You're not benefiting from it, are you? But that's a consumer. You're a consumer. But let's reverse it. Let's stick a mirror in front of it and create a 180-degree effect on that. Very simple. Very simple indeed. What happens if you don't consume? What happens to everyone who's producing products for you to consume if you don't consume them products? Oh, now we're getting the picture. So who holds the power? Exactly. That's it, I'm done. You realise now? To fight a system with a system is impossible. It's impossible. You cannot do it. You have nowhere to go for recourse. If you don't understand what recourse means, it means there is nowhere you can go to get justice because there isn't any. There isn't any justice at all. We live in the world of what's called the precautionary principle. Has anybody heard of this? Anyone come from a building site? Health and safety? Precautionary principle. Boots and all that, yeah, to put wood on a wall. Right, we live in a world of this precautionary principle. Now, I don't know if you know this, but your wonderful government, just about a mile down there, got a pretty building. He's just putting through a bill. Do you know, a bill goes through Parliament and becomes an act of Parliament. Now, in this bill, it says that all public servants are going to be void of prosecution for negligence. It's got something to do with the swine flu. So they can pump you full of this vaccine, and if you suddenly go, or whatever happens to you, they can't be prosecuted for negligence. Precautionary principles. Called the what-if syndrome. That's what I call it. Another thing you might find interesting is that the sovereignty of Parliament is being transferred to every local council. Well, it's all in black and white. Go and look for it yourself, you go and find it. But you haven't got the time to go and look for this stuff, have you? How many of you have got the time to actually research anything? What do you look for? What are you researching? Have I? Well, that's fair enough. At least you're honest. What are you researching, darling?
I'm campaigning to abolish forced adoptions.
Very good. It's very... You're doing what, though?
I'm dealing with juggling children in care.
Thank you, that's a good one. I like that one. What are you doing, sir? Yeah, that deserves it. Fair play. 1 second. I will get to you. I'm not all of you, but I will get to you. What are you doing, sir? Oh, I've done them. Not literally, but... Is there anything you're not actually researching? Well done. No, I'm only jesting. What are you doing, sir?
Psychopathy in politics.
You do what?
Psychopathy in politics.
Oh, that's an interesting subject. What are you doing, darling? Are you now? Now that will be interesting. I look forward to seeing that. I really do. That's fascinating. And what are you doing, sir?
Common purpose.
Oh, are you now? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I've looked into it a little bit. I've looked into it a little bit. How's the lady there? What are you doing, love?
I'm looking into the way in which the Forestry Commission is the Forestry Commission, which should be involved with protecting and expanding Britain's woodlands and forests.
Is in complete opposite.
With industrialisation,
Absolutely.
the National Forest Estate by pollution greenhouse stations in Wales.
In Wales. Beautiful place. And in Scotland. Right. What I was actually getting at was it's fascinating. I'm really pleased you are researching this stuff. I really am. What I'm getting at is how many people didn't put their hands up. Because you haven't got the time, have you, in your busy lives to do anything. And if you haven't got the times because you're too worried about paying council tax, paying the bills, buying food, getting your next telly, what car am I going to have this year, where I'm going on holiday, what I'm going to get the kids for Christmas. So you haven't got time to look. So a lot of things are done behind your back without you even knowing they're going on. But that's the beauty of it. What a beautiful system. What a simple system. See, Einstein talked about simplicity. He talked about genius. Genius is nothing that's complicated. It's simplicity in its essence. Create a core belief system, get everyone to subscribe to it, and all you ever do for the rest of your lives is defend it. And especially if someone like me comes along and says, oh no, it's not like that. Oh, bog off, you're just a tattooed carpenter. What do you know? Not a great deal. But I know something different to what you do. And we all do, actually. When we're talking to people, we all know something different, if we care to listen. But we use these little things we use a thing in our lives called judgment. We judge. We judge people by the clothes they're wearing. We judge people by the way they look, by the colour of their skin. And that's quite relevant at the moment, considering all the so-called terrorism that's going on. I wonder who really are the terrorists. According to the newspapers and the BBC, we're extremists. TPUC has just been labelled as extremists. It's for something we didn't do. We didn't have anything to do with it. It just happens that one of the posters had TPUC written on the bottom of it, so they wanted someone to label. We've been labelled as extremists for targeting Birmingham with swine flu vaccination posters. None of us went there. Nothing to do with us whatsoever. And the BBC have put this all across BBC Midlands. They tried to contact me and Dan 3 times yesterday trying to get a statement from us. What about something we want nothing to do with? But it's verbatim, it's on the BBC, and everyone believes it, TPUC and now extremists. We've just got the best form of advertising for actually doing nothing. And it's something me and Elizabeth used to talk about and joke about, because we knew this little thing. We just had this little joke between us, that the less you do, more happens. And it's absolutely true. The less you do, more happens. And it really does. I don't know if you know this, you know, if we're sort of internet people in here. TPUC is this tiny little website, tiny little thing. It seems to be known by quite a lot of people, but it's a tiny little website. It's just picked up over 17 million hits this month. 17 million hits. We've doubled. And I've got a funny feeling it's going to double again. Now, relatively speaking, that's incredibly small considering how many people there are actually in the world or there is in the country or on the island. But it's a really good sign that we're actually starting to tread on people's toes. I had an invitation from the tax man last week to go to court again because he wants £43,000 of something. I'm just not quite sure what he wants. Yeah, exactly. And he's trying to make me bankrupt from a bankrupt company. Now, a lot of you might not understand that, but if you look at the Gold Standards Act and the Bankruptcy Act, you soon will understand that. So the taxman's he's a funny entity to deal with, actually. He's quite funny. And I have a lot of fun with him. So they've started to break their own rules, and this is what I was waiting to happen. Because I've known this little thing, I've been doing this, I don't know, some of you might know it, this is why I don't want to do the talk as I normally do it. And it's a thing called no contract return to sender. If you actually define policy, the word policy, it actually means contract. So I know that if anything they're sending me via some form of policy that's gone through Parliament, then it's a contract, and I don't have to accept it, so I just send the bugger back to them and get them to pay the postage. £1.30 to be precise. They don't like me doing it, but there's not a lot they can do. So what the taxman did about a year ago is he sent this big wad of documents about this thick, and it had this letter on top of it, this big wad of documents, from the High Court down at the Strand that actually is called the Supreme Court of Justicia, which has been about for a long time. Supreme Courts are not new things. They've been about for ages. I took this and it says, a special order been placed in the Supreme Court, in the High Court down at the Strand, that you have to accept this paperwork through the post. Yeah, right. No contract, and off it bloody goes. I've been away from my family, and my partner is at the back, Ev, and I made massive mistakes when my family was concerned. Because I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And I've been back with my family for a couple of weeks now. I haven't been near the house. No letters, Ev will confirm this, from the taxman or anybody else all the time I was away. 2 days after I returned, 2 letters popped through the letterbox from the taxman. Now, plain white envelopes, like anyone would send. One was recorded, got signed for. One was normal. Looked at the recorded, turned it over, no return address. You can't do that. But there's no return address. Now, normally I go into a post office and send something recorded. I'm made to put something on the back, at least the postcode of who sent it. But this isn't. So I'm a bit suspicious, but I don't really deal with suspicion. So well, it's got to be something of interest. One of you lot might have sent me something. You do send me some quite mad things, believe me. So I opens it up. It's my mate, the taxman. So there's another special order from the High Court. This time you have to accept it by recorded mail and normal mail. Oh, bog off. No contract. It's gone back again. These people are stumped if you do not accept this stuff. All you've got to do is know this fact. But there's a little saying that I use, and it is quite simple. Do not step in the water unless you want to get wet. Lawful rebellion is about stepping in the water. If you want to change what we have now, you have to learn to use the ability of one word. And that word is no. That's it. That's all you've got to learn. Say it. No. Oh, yeah, that was really impressive. I'm the troll on the bridge. Yeah, come on, you've got to do better than that. No! Whew. Shivers down my spine. But you've got to learn another ability. You've got to learn to say it politely, with respect, in dignity, all the time. You never, ever, ever get angry. Because they can't deal with you unless you get angry. If you get angry, they all deal with you because that's all they're taught. When you are polite and pleasant, there's nothing they can do. I've watched him melt in front of me. It's brilliant. I watched the machine break. I've watched it many times. It goes, brrr. Someone's pulled the plug. And then back on again. And sometimes they come in and out of it. If you see this, they go, and they go back to being the machine again. There's some brilliant stuff on YouTube if you actually want to watch it, some fantastic stuff. The police, they're fantastic. So there's a hive mentality. And the hive mentality is the core belief system that you've subscribed to because you 100% every single day accept what's going on without doing anything about it. Because you daren't say no to these people because they're wearing costumes. But they are. What's a costume? They're not called acts by mistake because they're played out by actors who are acting wearing costumes. That's all it is. And when they go home at night, they take the costume off and stop being the actor. Get up in the morning, boom, boom, put the costume back on, they're back being the actor again. It's that simple. When you realise they are just an actor wearing a costume, the thing called intimidation starts to lessen. It takes a while, it does take a while. Them fluorescent jackets that the police wear can be quite alarming to some people. I know that. A judge wearing a funny wig on his head, or a barrister wearing a wig and they give it all this. But it's part of the act. Do you reckon they go home at night and walk around, hello, darling, I had a good day. It's like me being a chippy wearing my nail belt when I get home, smashing everything with the hammer handle. But this is the point I'm making. You live in a world of fear which is of your own creation. It's because you allow it to exist, not because they allow it to exist. All they've done is realised that you'll subscribe to this and they just took the piss. That's all they've done. They've done pretty much what most people would do if people just roll over and say, oh, go on then, tickle me belly. Go on, I like it really. I love being taxed to the hilt. Oh, it's fantastic. What a wonderful world we live in. But that's basically what you're saying. If you learn to use the word no, and you use it nicely, and when you do this for yourself, don't accept what I'm saying. I've done it. So I can relate the stories and tell you what actually happened, which people can corroborate, they can back it up. I've been attacked heavily because I was doing 122 on the M6. Excuse me, and got flashed by a camera. Had a conversation with a policeman who I got through the corporate officer to the policeman and then through to the man inside the costume, and I've never been prosecuted. I've never received a thing, and it's now actually out of date. It's completely out of date. So they can't do anything now anyway. I'm not saying you should go on the M6 and do 122 miles an hour. If you've got a car that does that speed and you like driving fast, go up onto the M6 toll road because it's a private piece of road and all you've got to do is pay £5.50 to go on the racetrack. But if you don't like driving fast, don't bother. It's like me with my seatbelt thing. I want to bring it back to that. I'm going to talk about this piece of paper in a minute. I want to bring it back to this seatbelt thing. I don't wear a seatbelt because I choose not to. It's my choice. If you want to wear a seatbelt, that's your choice. This is about choice. Seatbelts are for what? The precautionary principle. A friend of mine was just in an accident wearing a seatbelt. The seatbelt broke her sternum. That bone just there. Now, if that bone had splintered off and gone the wrong direction, what would have happened to her? So she would have been killed by a seatbelt. Oh. But they're there to save our lives, to stop us going through a windscreen. But in an accident, it will probably crush your chest and push your ribs into your heart. Your heart doesn't like that very much. It coughs and splutters and stops. The reason you're made to wear a seatbelt in the first place is because it's an insurance policy against part of the machine being broken that can't do the job it needs to do to keep the machine running. It's your choice. It is your choice. If my destiny, I believe in destiny. I don't actually believe in it. I know I have a destiny. I know my destiny brought me here today. Do you know how I know I've got a destiny? And I know everything's meant to be? Because if I wasn't meant to be doing this, I'd be somewhere else doing something else. Well, it is simple, isn't it? So, you have choices every single day. And this is what I want, the choice, you've got a choice whether to say yes or no. You don't have to accept things. And it's going to take a lot of us to do this. We've started something on TPUC, and I did it at 4 of my talks. We picked Tesco's. Tesco. We picked Tesco's, and we said, right, we're going to boycott Tesco's over fuel. We're not going to Tesco's anymore. We're going to boycott them. Absolutely. Very well said. Who was that? Well done. Quick wit, sir. What happens when enough people boycott Tesco's? What will happen to Tesco's fuel prices? What will everybody else do who supplies fuel? They'll bring their prices down, won't they? But you don't stop there. You then pick the highest again and do exactly the same. What are you going to end up with in the end? You're going to end up with fuel, not free, it was wishful thinking going on. What you're going to end up with is a situation where the fuel prices get to a reasonable level and will stay there because they know exactly what you'll do if they start to rise again. Who holds the power? You're getting it. See how simple it is? Now you can go down to Parliament Square and stand there till you're blue in the face, barking and shouting. You can protest outside Parliament. You can protest outside Downing Street, which is nicknamed Fort Knox. You can do all of that, and they'll just put the prices up. What happens if you start to deny their lifeline? See? It's this simple. This is how simple it is. If you want to take this government to court, can I ask you a question? What court are you going to actually take them to that they don't own? This one. This one. Yeah, okay. No. I'd feel sorry for them if they walked into here. Believe me. There'd be nooses hanging from all over the place. Poor buggers. I can't protect them all. Yeah.
It says in there this morning, EU takes UK to court.
Where? What court?
It says to court.
Oh, well, to court. So the EU are courting us now. There isn't one that they don't own. You've just got to get to the reality of this. There isn't a court that these people do not own. So where are you going to take them? There is nowhere. So it's like, right, it's going in, this is it, right. You're walking into the court to complain to Hitler about his SS guards. But that's what you're doing. You just don't get it. The only recourse you have is the ability to say no. That's the only ability you've got. And it's the only one you actually need. Okay, how many people control us? You got any idea how many people actually control us?
About 1,500.
Yeah, go on, kid.
I heard recently that it's only 12 people in the world who control everything.
Yeah, well, trust you to come out with something like that. Well, that's even better, actually, because the odds, 70 million to 12. Brian's talked about this many, many times. The odds are phenomenal. Why are you allowing this to happen? Oh, but if I don't pay my council tax, they're going to come and take my possessions that I value so much. Or the commodity I actually used to get them possessions in the first place. But what if all of you did it? Have they got enough bailiffs? They wouldn't know what. Where do we go next? Have they got enough police? No. They haven't got enough of anything. So when a bailiff gets in trouble and he calls the police for the backup, who's coming? No one. Mr. Bailiff's on his own. Do you get what I'm getting at? This is so simple. If you've got a problem, look for the simplest answer. That's all you've got to do. Every bit of power in this country is granted by you, and you can stop this whenever you want it to stop. Yes, you can. I am proof of it. I am proof that it can be done. Nothing. It's quite simple because we realise that they're sending us something that is coming under policy, which is a contract. So we realise it's a contract, they're offering us something. So we just send back the offer saying, well, no, thank you. We don't want it. You've got to do a lot of research to come to the understanding of that, and you've got to really dig deep. But it's what you see, right, it works in stages. What happens is, when you suddenly realise there's something wrong with the world, it's like springing out of a box. And you go, ooh, it's a bit different out here. And you jump, but the trouble is you generally land up in another box, which is another core belief system. So you're in there for a little while when you're talking to people, and you stick your head, oh, it's different again. And you land in another box. And that's the process you're going through because you've just asked that question. What you'll find out is you're actually going the wrong way. And if you go that way and go, oh, it's simple. This is the boxes of the complicated crap that we live in. The only reason you subscribe to the complicated world as it is because you don't know anything different. And the one thing we fear more than anything is the unknown. Because what happens when we're in the unknown? You have no control. And that's what we fear, the loss of control. If you took this government to court for treason, who would replace it? And what would you become? Exactly. You'd become them. Because a whole different system is needed. Anybody seen V for Vendetta? Yes. Do you like the end? Yes.
This year?
I don't know, I've got no contacts with Dynamite. Semtex? Ooh. No, we don't need to do anything like that. The concept, metaphorically, it's explaining something to you. We don't need that building. Not anymore. We've gone too far. None of that's needed, especially when they put through things like this. When you read this document for yourself, now I'm going to explain it to you now. I'm going to explain a little bit about it. I rang up Parliament the other day. I love having a chat with them. When I first used to ring up Parliament, I couldn't speak their language. You have to speak their language. Don't have to put on a voice. The women actually in the audience are better at this because you have a telephone voice. And that's the voice you need when you're speaking to these people. But what you need is their language, so you have to speak in their language. Okay? I can speak their language now, so I get a lot more answers. And I rang up Parliament the other day, and I happened to get hold of a very, very nice man, who I actually asked if I could meet him outside Parliament sometime to have a proper chat, which he declined. I don't know why, but he declined. But he told me something that's very interesting. He said to me, I asked him a simple question. It was a trick question, actually. It was a loaded question. And I asked him, do we live in what is called a representative democracy, or do we live in a democracy? Obviously, I'm playing the game. And he said, well, that's a very complicated question. I said, well, it's not actually. It's either one or the other. And he said, well, democracy. Oh, right, thank you very much. Glad we cleared that one up. I said, I've been looking into the 1911 Parliament Act, it was research from my book, and I found something in there that says that we don't have a democracy whatsoever. And he said, oh, I'm very interested. He said, what's this then? I said, well, according to what I can see, that the 1911 Parliament Act set up the one-party majority within the House of Commons as a dictatorship, removing royal assent and removing the power of the Lords, which were the three sections needed for any act, legislation, supposed law coming into this country. I said, but according to this document that I have in my hand, this has happened and we are now being railroaded. The people of this island are being railroaded because of this document. He said, well, I absolutely agree with you. What? You're agreeing with me that there's a dictatorship within the House of Commons? Oh yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Oh, okay. I said, well, what about representation, playing the game? He said, oh no, there's no representation for the people. They're only there to represent the wishes of the elite. Now, I found this very fascinating. And this is true. This is one, I will not lie to you. This is honest truth. This man said this to me. And that's what I said, I'd love to meet you outside Parliament. He said, well, that wouldn't, we can't do that. I said, oh, that's fascinating. So I rang up Parliament again, and I spoke to a very nice young lady, because I wanted to find out about something called the Select Committee, or Committee of Selection it's called. Turns out when a bill's going through Parliament, the Speaker of Parliament will call 10 MPs as a select committee to look at amendments. They actually can create 10 of these. So I said to her quite simply, how is that reflected? She said, but it's reflected on the majority in the House at the time. What? So you're telling me that every select committee is biased towards the one-party majority within the House at the time? She said, yes. I said, hold on a minute. So you're telling me every select committee is actually biased to Labour? So they'll always go with what Labour says? She says, well, yeah, pretty much. And you call that democracy? Oh, well, she said, I can't really discuss this any further, which you get a lot when you're talking about these subjects. Especially when you start hitting the nail on the head. So, I'm like, hold on, I'm stunned by all this. I'm making these phone calls, and I come into Heb, I said, you never believe what I've just had this conversation with Parliament. So anyway, I look a little bit deeper into the Parliament Act, and this is the Act here. Remember, this is part of our so-called constitutional protection. This document, it's one of the Acts. It's quite interesting because it says here, on the left-hand side, it says, powers of the House of Lords as money bills. Now, I don't know if you know the history of this document. And this was at a time when there was a Prime Minister called Henry Herbert Asquith. And Henry Herbert Asquith was part of the Liberal Party. His right-hand man, he had two, David Lloyd George and Winston Churchill. They were trying to put through a bill called the People's Budget. In all intents and purposes, if you actually look at the People's Budget, it's a bloody good document. A really good document. But it was a smokescreen. Because they needed this. This is what they needed. So anyway, I don't know if you know this, but in 1910, when Edward VII was the king, there was two general elections. I don't know if you know this. There was one in January, one in December. Our first one in January ended up with a hung parliament. Do you know what hung parliament is? Yeah? There was no majority. It was bang on. The seats were contained within, equal seating. Asquith, with Lloyd George's help and Winston Churchill's help, presented to Edward VII the 1910 Parliament Act, which is, all intents and purposes, this document. Edward VII read it, supposedly, and said to Asquith, to put this document through will cause, or make this bill an act, will cause a constitutional crisis, and sent it back. I don't know if you know the process, but a bill comes into the House of Commons or the House of Lords or private members' bill. They're bounced about like this, and all the amendments are done, blah, 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 blah. Once it's done, the House of Commons puts what's called a Speaker's certificate on it, and then it goes off to the Queen for her to put a moniker on it. Royal assent, that's called. That's the three system. That's how it's meant to come in. When Edward VII sent it back, saying it would cause a constitutional crisis, because he realised what was wrote in this document. And what this document took away was the need for royal assent, and it actually took away the powers of the House of Lords to stop any bill coming through Parliament, no matter what they put through. They could put a bill through tomorrow that says that all blue-eyed babies on Tuesdays born at 10 o'clock have to be killed, and there is nothing that can stop them from doing it. Nothing. Because of this piece of paper. But would you accept that? So why do you accept everything else that's done this? Why don't you just turn around and say, no, you're not doing this no more? Edward VII died the latter part of 1910 from a heart attack. And we had a new king come to the throne, it was George V. And George V was a little bit green in the gills, supposedly. Didn't really understand the Constitution, plus he'd been taught by Fabian. Sir Henry Martin, if I remember rightly. Anyway, cut a long story short, Asquith decided to present the 1911 bill to George V. He sent about 20 letters, private letters, went across from Asquith to King George. And these are on the internet if you want to go and have a look for them, so you can actually see the wording that was used. If you get a little book by Roy Jenkins about the Liberal Party, you'll find that they boast about how Asquith persuaded the king. They boast about the fact. And I got that from Ashridge. I don't know if you've heard of Ashridge. Ashridge is a training college for Fabians in, is it Hertfordshire? It is Herts, isn't it? I just wondered if it crossed the border. And do you know what they actually, their business slogan, because it's a business school, do you know what their slogan is? Make money from global warming. Go and look it up yourself. Don't worry about global warming, make money from it. I happened to pick up this little book up there because they've got a book thing that you just pay £1 for 3 or 4 books or whatever you buy, and we just happened to pick this book up. So what happened was, George V, this is what they needed to do. At the time, there was a Conservative majority within the House of Lords that were stopping all money bills going through. So what they needed to do was to take the powers away from them Lords. To do that, they created what's called a second chamber. The second chamber was to be filled with Liberal peers. This was the start of the process of what they call popular peer and not hereditary. If any of you know what Mr. Blair did, bless his heart, to the House of Lords a few years ago, what did he do? He booted out the rest of the hereditary peers. This process started in 1911. So what they did is they needed to get the majority within the House of Commons. It wasn't just good enough to get. Remember, they'd had a hung parliament. So in the last ever election in 1910 was the last time elections were spread over a week. I don't know if you know this, they used to take over a week. It was the last ever one. They needed to control the Commons. This is what Lloyd George and Churchill were up to. So they employed the services of none other than Sinn Féin. In doing this, they created the seat. This is how close it was. The Conservatives got 271 seats. The Liberals, using Sinn Féin, got 272. That's how close it was. The only reason the second general election actually happened was because Edward VII said you cannot curtail the powers of the House of Lords without putting it to the people. So to do it, you have to put it via general election. That's why there was 2 general elections. Now, the interesting part about this is that George V, for whatever reason, did create them peers. And that second chamber of peers started to control everything else the rest of the peers were doing. If you look at the 1946 Parliament Act, which is the next one on from this one, you'll find that the House of Lords was then contained within only 3 sessions. They could only look at anything. And I don't know if you know this, but none of the amendments are actually looked at. I don't know if you probably don't know this, but the amendments actually just get tagged on. You can go and find this stuff out, I don't need me to tell you. But there's some interesting words in here, because one of the things it says here, money bill having been passed by the House of Commons and sent up to the House of Lords at least 1 month before the end of the session is not passed by the House of Lords without amendment within 1 month after it has been sent up to the House. They do write some bollocks, these people. I could write this in a sentence. Up to the House of Bill. The bill shall, unless the House of Commons direct to the contrary, be presented to His Majesty to become an Act of Parliament on the Royal Assent being signified, notwithstanding that the House of Lords have not consented to the bill. Now, if you don't understand what the word notwithstanding means, it means in spite of. Complete override of the House of Lords on money bills. If you carry on through the Act, you'll find that for all bills, whether they be money, public or private, in this document. It gets better. If you go on the House of Parliament site, if you go on the Opsy site, I don't know if you've ever done this, but go on the one that's called Bills Going Through Parliament. Okay, just type that into Google. Bills going through Parliament. And you will get a list of all the bills going through Parliament as of now. Yeah? And they've all got a certain wording at the top of them. And what you'll find that wording says is this. It says, be enacted. Now, it says that because if you write at the top of something and you give it to someone saying, be enacted, there's not much of a choice, is there? Now, I could be just saying that because the words But if you actually look at what they put at the beginning of it, on the second paragraph down, you'll see it says, "Be it therefore enacted." Do you know what the word therefore means? If you put therefore before something, it means that you've already logically concluded it's going to happen. This was a royal assent override. Whether you believe it or not, it was. When you suddenly realise that now the speaker's certificate is actually good enough as royal assent. It basically is the royal assent. So when you see this that's written in the back of here, it says, "Any certificate of the Speaker of the House of Commons given under this Act shall be conclusive for all purposes and shall not be questioned in any court of law." In their own words, in black and white. I ask you, what does that create? A dictatorship. In their own words. I will leave this here, because I've got many copies. Like I said, this is going up on the internet. It needs to go up on the internet because you people need to look at this. You really do. That's just one example. I can give you hundreds.
What's the website going to be on?
TPUC.org. Yeah, that's our website. When you start to look at this stuff, you'll suddenly realise what you've been subscribing to. And you'll realise that what was set up to protect you, according to them, is absolutely the complete opposite. And the only way that you will ever do anything to change this situation is when you learn to say no. And you stand by it. And you unite. When you suddenly put down the divisions of colour, speech, where we come from, what we look like, how much money we've got. When these divisions have gone, then you will become a people of an island again. Politics comes from one very specific hierarchical system. And politics was devised to divide people. That's all it was ever devised for, was to divide you. Most of the things that have core belief systems create with them create divides. What we need to do is bridge them divides. In learning to say that word, you will start to bridge them divides. And you start to unsubscribe from this core belief system. You end up quite in a very odd position. You are actually a non-believer and a believer at the same time. And that's a very hard thing to be, because you're going to get tugged from both directions. And I know how frustrating it is. I know how hard it is. I would like to leave you with one thing. And I would like to, just this one thing. And this is one of my last talks. I have to write that book. It's very specific now. And I'm on a deadline. They've put me on a deadline because it's the only way to get me to do it. I actually want to go out on the tools. I want to go and build roofs again. I'm fed up with this crap. Because I know how simple it is to do now. It really is that simple. We will keep producing evidence for you on the TPUC. We will keep doing it, and we will keep putting that evidence out. We have accounts now with... We'll keep doing it. Whether you subscribe to it or not, doesn't matter. It will be there for you to look at. Because once you start to uncover corruption, you know that it hides in the shadows of every one of these corporations. And it's the shadows that have to be illuminated. And it's the light bringer they fear. The one who illuminates it. And all potentially, you're all the light bringers. You're the ones who are going to illuminate this corruption just by looking at your own councils. It only takes one of you. No, they're a group of people who like shoving light bulbs up their arse. When you look at this, we have one thing to do, and this is all we have to do. You were born free. From your first breath, you were free. All of you. Every single one of you. You've just been contained within a belief system that you're now going to break away from. But the gift of freedom belongs to everybody without exception. In these millennium years, let history show that we helped make it so. Thank you.